So thank you for coming to talk to me about this topic, because I know that you are a child care expert, newborn care specialist, postpartum doula. You've been a nanny, and so you've filled a lot of roles in this kind of area, and working with families with new babies, especially. And so that's the topic of this week's article, and I thought you would have some really good insights to share. Just to say real quick that Renee also is a teacher with us, starting to teach some newborn care and infancy parent safety classes at Breastfeeding Success, which I am so excited about because I've been having so much fun meeting Renee and working with Renee. So you have some really good insights. So first of all, we've talked to some families at the support groups, the bosom buddies groups that are facing this right now, facing these kinds of decisions. We have new babies. We're going back to work soon. Things are going well. But now we have these new decisions to make, and that can be really hard. It can be scary. Sometimes people plan way ahead. Maybe they have a work situation that means they have childcare built in. And so all they have to do is get their name on a list and they already know what they're doing. But most people have to really start thinking about this once the babies come. And sometimes they even will consider new options that they didn't even consider before. Once the babies are here, they might realize, oh, well, I didn't realize that I could maybe do some kind of a hybrid thing with work, or I might not need as much childcare as I thought I would. So now I'm looking into these other options. So when a family is considering childcare options, like, what are the main ones out there?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I think that you can start with, obviously, a nanny, a daycare. Postpartum doulas are usually stay about 3 months. Some stay 6 months, so that's an option. And then family members, friends. There are lots of options. Nanny shares. You can trade with friends. I'm probably missing something, but maybe we'll circle back and get to it.
No, I think that was everything that I had on my list.
Good.
My article outline, besides maybe just kind of dividing up the idea of daycare center into, a daycare center, but then there's also like in-home daycares. People will provide childcare in their homes. So maybe fewer kids, maybe just a little bit of a different atmosphere, a more home atmosphere. So there are a lot of different preferences among families. So a lot of different options out there. Once you've kind of narrowed it down, I mean, there's benefits and drawbacks to any of those things, right? It might be that you have a ton of family around, or maybe you even have a partner that you can kind of switch off with work. So maybe they alternate days or alternate times of day, where now you really only have like some smaller windows where you don't have childcare, and you might have grandparents or aunts and uncles or someone else around that might be able to help you with that, or even a neighbor that also has kids and they work on alternating days, and you can just trade off. Like you said, you can trade to be, very minimal cost or very low cost. It's possible. There are definitely options like that out there. There are even some really cool apps and web-based services that can help you get matched up with other people looking to do that kind of thing. So really that's an area that some people really prefer to explore. On the flip side, daycare centers, that's something that's pretty well known, and that's pretty easy. That might even be like the easiest, right?
Yes, and also Mother's Day Out programs. There are those too. So if you're not ready to put your child in, or if your work schedule, allows, you can have your child in daycare 2 days a week, half days, or, some of these programs, Mother's Day Out programs, are a little bit cheaper, and also kind of tend to get you started in like being away from your baby, which, you don't realize until you have your baby how that might be hard. And so being away from them less, if your schedule allows you to do that, or your job, you can choose those options, 2 days a week or 2 mornings a week, and then start adding on when you start feeling more comfortable,
Yeah.
being away from your child.
I think that's a really good point. Two really good points right there. One, that there's a huge range of how you might be feeling. Some people are very ready to go back to work and
Yes.
can't do it quick enough. They just need to feel, need that kind of engagement, and that is perfectly fine. And then there are other people where it seems impossible to go back. It just doesn't feel right to them. So for some people, it feels very right. For other people, it doesn't. It's all over the place. And so, like you're saying, there's also a lot of in between. For some people, it feels like a little bit, but not too much. And so taking all that into consideration and recognizing that's okay. Whatever it is you're feeling is okay. And you can probably find something to suit you in that way. And then the other thing you said that was a really good point now has completely slipped my mind. Oh, now, just that you can work your way up to it. You don't have to start, in the deep end, right? You don't have to jump right in that way. You can start out with some kind of a hybrid situation where you work a little, but not too much, or you work from home some, but not too much. And then you can add on as your baby, like you can tell things change and you feel more ready and they feel more ready. And then you're in a completely different place. So those are really important things to keep in mind. Just because this is what you plan doesn't mean that's what you end up sticking with for very long. You can change it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you don't know until you have your baby, and then you have different feelings, or maybe you're right on track with what you had planned. I think there are people who have to go back to work, and a lot of people do, and even though they want to be home with their baby, and that's a big struggle. And I think, one of the things that I really tell a lot of moms is to give it that first week or two, and just be gentle with themselves, give themselves lots of grace. They are going to miss their babies. They're going to be okay because they've done all the footwork before to find proper care. But that it, it's a transition, emotionally difficult, but it does get better.
Yeah. Yeah. It can feel almost impossible at first. And then it's amazing how much better it can get quickly. Yeah. Something to look forward to and wait for. Okay. And then there are, like you said, so daycare centers tend to be the easiest just because you don't have to do as much footwork for that. You've kind of got to stick to a certain area. For most families, you don't want to have to go way out of your way to find, to drop off and pick up. And so finding places that are near in your area, in your price range, that have availability, usually that puts it down for you, but then they do a lot of the work for you as far as, hiring the caregivers and doing the applications and the screenings and the background checks and all of that. It might be a lower cost option in a lot of situations just because they have, more children per caregiver.
Right.
So a lot of benefits to doing that. Very flexible in general. It's, there will always be someone there. If someone's out sick, well, there's someone there to step in. Holidays and things like that, vacation time. You don't have to worry about those kinds of things. So definitely some benefits to doing that. With the in-home daycare option, we talked about some of the benefits of that. So what would be some of the things that you would think are the biggest benefits there?
Yeah, I think you don't have to drive in traffic. Having an in-home caregiver is very personal. And if you're looking for a new, a family member, really, then that's a good way that's a good option for you. If you want to have a nanny for a long period of time, and your child grows up with this person. I think that's beneficial. It's, they're getting one-on-one care, which has lots of strengths. Yeah, I think those are the main things.
Do you think that in some cases it's an easier transition for the babies? Like I've heard it kind of go both ways, like for the kids, as far as like, okay, if their parents are going back to work, so they're having a new caregiver, but being in the home, kind of like a little bit of an easier transition? Or does this depend on the kid?
It does depend on the child, but I think you're right. I think, that's their environment and their safe place. And so that's, they're not going into, it depends on the age too. If you are someone who, takes your baby to daycare or has a nanny at 6 weeks, right? Like if they're not going to really understand that daycare, transition, maybe in some ways, but I think it was a good point that in home is more comfortable for that baby, and definitely as it grows. There's just so many different, like in daycare, it's really, socialization, and, they have lots of activities, but a nanny who is a professional nanny and a career nanny is going to have those things laid out as well. So it's just really like what people can afford. And then what kind of caregiver relationship do you want? Do you want someone who, is sort of an auntie, Yeah, I think that's.
Or something kind of keeping it more on a professional level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Yeah.
There's benefits to both for sure. Okay. And then finding, if let's say that you're going to go with like an in-home route. So in your home specifically, there are the in-home daycares too, which is the care provider's home, right? The caregiver's home.
Yeah.
And then maybe several kids or a couple of kids are all part of that. And that's kind of like a hybrid, like a daycare center, but maybe just lower volume. So maybe there's that benefit, but there's still socialization. It's not quite as flexible maybe because you have that one person. And if that person is sick or takes a vacation or whatever, you find new arrangements. So ups and downs for all of these options, of course. It's just mostly what fits best for your family. So let's say if you're needing to hire someone, whether that's someone with their own like in-home daycare, or you're hiring someone to come to your home to provide care in one way or another, how do you find those people? So I understand you were mentioning something about like the agencies, and so what what are the benefits of doing that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, to start, I think word of mouth is best. And then, there are a few agencies here in Austin that I do like. And, the agencies can be a little bit more expensive because they're doing all their background checks. They're, making sure they're doing all the things that are needed for that person to be vetted, which is great. Sorry, what was your, where am I going? I forgot.
Yeah, exactly that. The benefits of using an agency, benefits and downsides. So downside would be cost.
Downside would be cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Upside is they do the legwork for you. They know the people already.
Exactly.
They recommend the people to you.
Yeah.
Do they usually try to match you with someone that might work best for your family? Do they get that detailed? Okay.
They do. They ask a lot of questions for what your needs are. And so it really makes it easy for the nanny to look at that list and say, yes, I feel comfortable doing that. If they want a nanny who also, maybe when the baby naps, maybe she folds laundry, but so that's all laid out in in an interview with an agency. And so as a nanny, you can look at those things and see if it's just very clear. The communication is really clear. When you're on your own and looking for a nanny, you have to make up that list. Like, what do I want? What kind of person do I want? It's you're doing more of the legwork. So you are paying a little bit more for an agency, but it does pay off.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's say that you're on a tight budget and you can't go through an agency. What are some alternatives for finding someone? Like you said, word of mouth. So you can ask around at work, ask around in your neighborhood or whatever. But are there anything else? Any other ways?
Yeah, you can try to find another person who's looking for care and maybe near you and do a nanny share.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can look for someone near your work if that would be easier, or someone near your home. And that splits the cost. So if, these days a nanny is, $20 to $45, depending on experience and certificates and education. So, if you find a nanny for $20 and you share that nanny, you're paying $10 an hour, which is, it's much better. It's much easier for a lot of people who can't afford that, personal care or the agency or the daycare. Yeah.
I've also heard of people sharing a nanny like that, but instead of splitting the hourly cost like that, it's more about, we don't need full time, but this person who we really want needs full-time work. And so we can find another family who needs a nanny part-time. We need a nanny part-time. And then we can help her get enough hours and get her full-time hours, but just divided between two families.
Absolutely.
And that can be, I've definitely heard of that happening. And as far as like how to find those people, how to find those situations, that part's tricky. It's, a lot of times just getting out there and knowing other people with babies, with children. But I think there's some more formal ways, like through Facebook groups, through local, next door, finding those parent groups that you can join. A lot of times they're private groups. You have to request to join. But then they're going to be all about that.
Yes.
And that's where you can go and ask, or people will post things there and you can see like, hey, we're looking for someone to split time with it we've got this great nanny, but she needs more hours. Is there anybody there looking for someone part-time?
Yeah.
And so just really digging into those kinds of resources area, because they can be fine sometimes.
And if that's the case where you find someone who has a nanny already but can't give her all the hours that she needs, they've already vetted that nanny, so that work is done. Yes, you need to interview that nanny and make sure she's a good fit for you, but there's a trust level there that's like, okay, this person has worked with this family this long, they love her, these are the things they love, or him, mostly her, but
definitely. And then, so when you're, meeting someone and considering someone as a candidate, you mentioned before about references and how important you think it is.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend?
It is. I do. I recommend having calling 3 references. And I know it's uncomfortable to call strangers and ask them about, but it's important for your own, just, peace of mind. And you can ask those questions, why do you like her? How is she with your baby or your child? What kinds of things do they do? How long has she been with you? Is she clear about communication? These are the super important questions that you need to ask.
Yeah. And I mean, everybody's going to have their own maybe special list of questions. I mean, there's some basics that everybody would want to ask about, but like, what are your most like specific questions? You might have certain things that are really important to you. Like, are they very, very punctual? And,
yes.
how often are they calling in and not able to come? And do they have a flexible schedule? Are they willing to sometimes work on, evenings or weekends if we're going to go out on a special occasion or take a trip or something like that? Because that can be, so yeah, a lot of different questions to consider when you're talking to references. There's a lot you can find out, right?
Yes. Hopefully they're talkative and they just,
yes,
just let you know why they're working for them.
Yeah. And you said something that, a lot of times we don't think about, but if they're putting someone on there as a reference, that person probably liked that
yes.
employee, that nanny.
Yeah.
Otherwise they might not be offering that reference. And so, you might try to ask some more probing questions about specific things, because then you might get more information. This person just overall feels great about her, but if you want to know more specific things, you might have to ask for those. And maybe even asking about, okay, biggest strengths, what about the biggest weaknesses, and kinds of things, so that they're kind of forced to find something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I was interviewing for a postpartum position, my employer asked me, what was the most difficult part about your last job? The most difficult thing about your last job. And, how do they answer that? Are they answering it in a negative way, or are they answering it in, this was really hard for me, and this is what I did? Or, how are they talking about the baby? Are they talking about it, or the the parents of that last job? I think it's just really important, just attitude, and outlook.
Definitely. So then you said something when we were first talking about this that was very surprising to me, but a really great point. Cameras. So if you're hiring someone to be in your home with your child, I mean, a lot of daycare centers have cameras set up so you can check in on your baby, but if it's in your home, specifically, what are the thoughts about that? What's the kind of normal thing? What's typical? What's acceptable with cameras?
Yeah, I mean, for me, as a person who works in people's homes, I hope that they have a camera. I hope that they have a camera, because I want them to feel like their baby is safe, or their child is safe, and their things are safe. I also, want them to, pick up on any verbiage that I'm, how I'm talking to their child, because that might help them work out different scenarios of, of care. If there's if a child wants a toy and they, like how I work that out verbally, it might give them, sort of a roadmap on how to do that. Yeah, I always want a camera, so that it makes people feel comfortable. I think that if a nanny doesn't feel comfortable with that, I definitely probe about why. Some people, it feels very personal and kind of, I'm not sure the word, just offensive or intrusive. And it's someone's home. If it's important to them, they need to be able to have a camera. I think that if you do have a camera and it's not out in the open, if it's hidden, that nanny needs to know that it's there.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. It doesn't seem quite right to hide it, or to not mention that it's there. But yeah, I mean, you said that, and I realized, it on one hand, it seemed a little weird to me at first. It seems a little weird to think about being on camera.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean, most of us work in environments where we're with coworkers. We're being observed all the time. Our work performance, how we behave at work, and all of that is being observed by our coworkers, by our bosses, and
Yes.
that's not weird, right?
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
like that. It makes a lot of sense, and I love the idea that if it was me, if I was a parent and you're there taking care of my baby, and there's some things that I've been struggling with, I might be able to say like, oh, look at that thing she just did. I just learned something. I'm going to try that tonight.
Yes.
I
do that a lot because I work at night, and I'm just, I'm hoping that they are recording the whole 8 hours that I'm there, because there are so many little tricks that I do that I don't verbalize or I don't write in my notes, because I just naturally, have done them for so many years, and it's the thing that they needed,
Yeah.
So I approve of a camera.
And then you mentioned some things like in an interview when you're actually face to face and meeting with this candidate. Some little tips for things to look for on a more personal level. Things you're not going to get on a resume or an application, or maybe not even from references. But what kinds of things are you observing when you're talking to someone?
Yeah. Allie, I have to stop for just a second because I think my computer is about to die for some reason.
Okay, no problem.
Can we stop and then start again? Is that something we can do?
If you have your cord nearby,
yeah,
go for it. And I'll just keep it running.
Okay.
And then and I'll just keep talking.
Okay.
So you mentioned some things that I liked very much. And one of those things involves having your baby there. Having your baby there for the interview, your child there for the interview, so that you can kind of see how that person relates to the child while you're sitting right there watching, right? So what kinds of things are you looking for then?
Yeah, I think that's that's a really important, when you open the door, and every time your nanny comes, but when you open that door for the first time and they look at your baby, how are they looking at your baby? Are they looking at your baby fondly, or did they notice them at all? And they're just, sometimes people are nervous, right, in interviews, but, do they ask to hold your baby? Because they're going to be holding your baby, and so I think just it's important to watch how that person is with your baby, and just watch that for 5 or 10 minutes or however long, or give them the baby and do the interview. How are they, how do they behave around the baby? I think it's important to see that.
Agreed. I really like that idea. You can tell sometimes a person who really knows what to do with the baby and a person who feels less secure about that.
Yeah.
Or isn't as interested. And I know for myself, like I want someone who loves babies.
Yes.
And who does this because they love being around babies. It's something that they enjoy.
Yeah.
Not just because it's a job.
Yeah.
And what else? Like, is there anything else that you're looking at?
When you're in the interview?
Yeah.
When you're interviewing that person?
Or any specific things that you might ask that you might not get from a resume?
Yeah. Well, I think that, if you have a newborn, I think up to 6 months, I think it's important that you have someone who has experience, who has had jobs before and they're confident, right? Because newborns are just a completely different than a sturdy 6-month-old, 9-month-old. So I think it's important that they have worked with babies.
So specifically asking for the ages, like, have you actually worked with newborns?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
And that can be hard to get from a resume. They might not mention the children's ages. Okay.
Yeah. And toddlers, like you worked with toddlers, if that's what you're you know, that's the age of your child, just because there are age appropriate activities, you know, that are they're different with every age, you know. So it's important that they have some experience, even if it's, you know, if you have a toddler and you're hiring a babysitter, have you babysat before, you know?
Right.
You know, everybody has to start somewhere. I get that. You know, it's just, if you have a newborn, I really suggest that you have somebody that has worked in the field.
Yeah. And then I guess there was just one more thing that
Mhm.
I remember talking with you about that made a lot of sense to me that I would want to know,
Mhm.
how a person handles criticism. And
Yeah.
especially but that can be so hard, right? So when
Mm.
you're a nanny and you're working with their child in their home,
Mhm.
I mean, there's just some level of, it's so personal. You're in their things, you're with their baby, and there's a lot there. And so it's natural to want things to be done a certain way when it's your home and your child.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
of course, and so setting up those expectations ahead of time, you know,
Mhm.
expectations, but then sometimes when those expectations are not met, or when they're
Mhm.
not communicated well, maybe even, but you're seeing that
Mhm.
these expectations are not being met, how is that person going to handle it? And you probably
Mhm.
want to know ahead of time,
Mhm.
because something's going to come up, and it's either
Mhm.
going to be really awkward and weird,
Mhm.
and we'll just start building up resentments, and then
Yeah.
that relationship is going to crash and burn,
Yeah.
or you'll be able to handle it well. You'll be able to be
Mhm.
open with that communication, and then that person will be able to hear it and
Mhm.
accept it, and then, you know, work it back into the rotation or whatever. So like, how do you, I guess,
Yeah.
when you're interviewing someone,
Mhm.
how do you find that out? Do you give them a little, hey, let's role play this? I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question to ask the references, right? Because they've had the experience with that person. But also, yeah, I think really like focusing on communication, right? And, you know, if this happened, like, how would you handle it? We want this from our nanny. And maybe we've had an experience where somebody was resentful and didn't tell us that they didn't want to do that. So how would you handle that? Would you be able to come to us and tell us you didn't want to, I don't know, clean somebody's closet, or, you know, would you be able to say that's not part of my job? It's not in my job description. You know, how would you word that? You know, I, communication is hard just across the board. So like communicating with an employer it's just hard, you know. So keeping those lines open, I think for a nanny family, I think that they should ask weekly, how are you doing? Are you getting what you need from us? You know, I think it's really important that, and I think the nanny needs to ask that too. Are we good? Are you happy with my job, you know, and that I'm doing? Is there anything I can do differently? Um, yeah, I think I would recommend that absolutely every week or every 2 weeks. Just check in, you
That's great.
know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. And we could all do that, right? In our jobs, so, in our
In
relationship
life.
and life. Okay. Thank you so much, Renee. I don't think I have any more questions. I think this is really helpful. And I'll be seeing you soon
I'll be
in the
seeing you soon.
classroom.
Thanks for having me.